I was trying to think about why I loved Jason Naylor's new book, Live Life Colorfully, 99 Ideas to Add Joy, Positivity, and Creativity to Your Life so much. Yeah, it has the usual inspiration stuff that you can find in just about any creativity book. All of value, all great to hear and great to read. I love it, baby. But it's the color aspect, and specifically the fluorescent color palette that was so pervasive in the early 1990s. So Jason's book was very neon, and everything was neon in the early 90s. So the color scheme of the book is very much in that vein, and I love it. Plus, I love illustrators and wish I was better at it, and perhaps wish I could pivot to that. But that is nonsense, am I right? It's not like I have a trillion other things on my plate that I'm already just kinda sorta good at. Starting over on something is not in the cards. Not right now, anyway. All I know is when I see lots of color, it makes me happy. It's why I've done these crayon drawings that I post on my personal Instagram. Stupid, but they're fun and kind of calming for me. I think they're fun and messy. And using crayon is such a tool of being a kid, and raw and gross and messy and disorganized and imprecise. I kind of like it. It's a kind of a reflection of me, right? Makes sense. So Jason's book is badass and should face outward on your shelf to give you that pop you might need. Oh, by the way, I'm Brendan O'Mara, hey, and this is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast. We love that, baby. This is the show where I talk to badass people about the art and craft of telling true stories. Sometimes that's podcasters, memoir writers, essayists, narrative journalists, filmmakers. Today it's an illustrator, muralist, turned writer, and Jason Naylor. He's at Jason Naylor on Instagram. This show pairs nicely with previous episodes with like Michi Ng, author of Barely Functional Adult, Scott Campbell of Adventures in Drawing, even Emily Poole, the illustrator behind the great book Bird Note. If you like pairings like a certain wine and a certain dark chocolate, if you will. In any case, moving on to a different topic. Before we get to Jason, of course, you've got 9 days as of this publication to submit your essay for summer. That it needs to be in my inbox, creativenonfictionpodcast@gmail.com. Guidelines are atop the homepage of brendano'mara.com. Hey. And if you aren't a member on Patreon, you'll be missing out on the CNF Pod Audio Literary Magazine. For as little as $2 a month, new tier, you get access to the 2 issues of the magazine in 2021. There are other tiers worth shopping around that you can get. You'll get maybe some coaching and transcripts. But in order to support the magazine, we need members. I'll put money in the pockets of other writers, too. This isn't a selfish endeavor. It just helps subsidize the whole operation. It takes a lot of work. And, of course, I want to pay that forward to a lot of the writers, too. It would be nice to be known as a place that pays writers a lot for the amazing work that they submit and have the courage to submit. So, in any case, this podcast is partially sponsored, let's just say it's sponsored by Exit 3 Media's Casualty of Words, a writing podcast for people in a hurry. Last I checked, that's you. Episodes are like usually under 3 minutes long and give you a little shot in the arm. I think a person once said it's kind of like a gummy vitamin of inspiration in the morning. You could even listen to Casualty of Words while brushing your teeth and be like, you know what? When I'm done spitting out this used toothpaste, I'm going to get right at it. That's what Casualty of Words does for you, baby. Anyway, while at brendano'mara.com, there you can also get your ass on the newsletter list. In my goal to subvert social media and run an end around, that's the garage where we really jam and get the band together. I could send out a tweet, but Twitter decides who sees that and when. When you get a monthly email, you decide when you see it. It lands in your inbox when I send it, once a month. There are no algorithms curating your email, deciding when and if you see that newsletter, right? That's what I love about it, and that's why it's such a great thing to double down on a permission asset. If you can get a newsletter going, do it. If you want a little template for how to maybe set yours up, subscribe to mine. I mine is my own voice, but it's heavily inspired by Austin Kleon's among others. But I like it through my own prism, if you will. Lots of cool articles, podcast news, that kind of thing. Once a month, no spam. So far as I can tell, you can't beat it. So right now I got Jason Naylor here today. He's an inspiring dude with a positive message that makes me want to be a better man. Stay tuned for my parting shot at the end of the show, but in the meantime, check out this conversation with Jason Naylor. Rip. Pretty cool, like being, a street artist and working in spray paints primarily, that essentially the world in the city can be your museum, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you called it a museum. It's normally it's like the city is your canvas, and it totally is. And the fact that you called it a museum is amazing because in a way, like, I guess it is more than a canvas because it is people walking around viewing the work, whether they chose to or thought they were going to or not. They stumble upon it or they go to see it. But yeah, it is amazing when you put it that way. It's extra amazing.
Now I understand, like growing up, your mother was a great influence on you in terms of creativity, and your father had a different sensibility and gave you a real sense of maybe the nuts and bolts of turning your creativity into something that can sustain you. So I was wondering if maybe you can speak to those influences and how they turned you into the artist and person you've become today.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you brought that up. My mom is an artist. She does portraits and paintings, and her work is, well, let me back up to say that she was never a professional artist per se. She did it more as a hobby, and she was busy with the seven children, and I'm one of seven. So, in her spare time, she was able to paint and draw. She did pencil portraits and stuff like that. So beyond that, she's also very creative. And so me and my siblings, of course, spent a lot of time with colored pencils and paper and doing craft kind of things. I was the kid that rather than being out playing soccer, I was probably building Legos or like, drawing on a big sheet of paper that my mom would put out. So I think that was a pretty common thing as far as I can remember back. So I think that, that obviously sets the stage for the creative portion of the rest of my life. And then my dad, he is a commercial real estate developer and broker. And he was always, discussing his business and this sort of entrepreneurial conversations that he was having. I think they kind of rubbed off on me. And, I actually went to real estate school when I was in college one summer, and I thought I was going to help him out on projects, and I hated it so much. It was so not for me, and so I actually dropped out of real estate school. And maybe he was bummed about that, maybe he wasn't. It was sort of a non-issue. He always was supportive of me being able to do what I wanted to do, be what I wanted to be. And he did give me this empowered feeling that I could be what I wanted to be. And I studied graphic design in school, so I was on track to be this graphic designer, which is like a money making artist career. And so he loved that. But over the years, obviously, I've evolved out of design and into doing like street spray paint, murals, and all that kind of stuff. And I know that he thinks it's so cool. So yeah, that kind of, those two sides kind of created a nice structure for me, where I had a little bit of the nuts and bolts, like you said, and the creativity, and now I'm able to use both together to run this creative business that I'm running.
And maybe take us to that moment when maybe you had to have a tough conversation with your dad when you were thinking of dropping out of real estate school, that something that is classically stable, to pursue something that is on its surface much softer footing, and certainly less maybe certain, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, although I can't actually recall that conversation, and which makes me think that it must have been a non-issue. I think if it were something, if there were friction because of it, I probably would remember. So and since it was while I was in college, what I what I think I'm going to invent this memory here. What I think happened was it kind of fizzled because I wasn't interested, and instead I was probably occupying myself with my school, university related projects, which were art projects, but they were on this other track, which also had some stability in its future. So I imagine that he was probably like, well, he's not into real estate, but he still is like headed on a pathway that works.
Nice, nice. And so was seven of you growing up. Where did you fall in the continuum of the kids?
So I'm number two, and we're
Okay.
all pretty close together. So basically like 2 years apart, three at most. So it's a tight group, and we're still pretty close. I mean, everyone's grown up and all over the country and everything. But all the relationships are great.
Are there any other artists among your siblings?
Yeah, actually, my both of my brothers are extremely artistic and creative, although neither of them have really pursued art professionally. And I will say this too. I'm a little bit bummed that they haven't, because I see their sketchbooks and their personal work, and all I can think of is like you would be such a smash hit if you would like take this somewhere a little bit further, but they've got other things going on. So
Nice. And as you're developing, your skill and, in graphic design, and you're getting, that under your belt, what are you also doing, creatively to, scratch a certain itch that might be something, a seed essentially you planted that is now really bearing fruit.
as a graphic designer, so I was working in-house for this company called Mac Cosmetics, and Mac is a makeup company that's very colorful. And so I was doing graphics and like design kind of work, art direction. I thought it was really cool at the time. So I actually felt really fulfilled in that job. But over the course of the years, I think I started to feel like I wasn't putting my name on anything. I didn't feel ownership over the work that I was doing, because I was like busting my ass to, for the betterment of this brand, not my brand. And that started to become a little bit of a problem. But at the time, I wasn't really doing anything about it. I wasn't really like, like you think you'll go home at night and work on your personal projects, but when you have a day job, that's actually really hard to do. You get home at night and you're exhausted, and
Yeah.
or you want to go out and have a beer with your friends or whatever it is, and so you don't really pursue these things. Or I should say, I wasn't pursuing these scratching that itch, so to speak. So long story short, to answer your question, ultimately that drove me to quit my job so that I could start to scratch that itch, and so that I could start to put my name on my work. And it wasn't really until I had kind of found the rhythm of not having a job was I able to really start doing my own work and understanding what kind of work I wanted to do.
And did you draw yourself up kind of a playbook of sorts of how to go about, leaving the steadiness of your day job to step into something that was definitely more fulfilling for you, where you could put your Jason Naylor stamp on it, kind of keep the lights on overhead while you're trying to build that personal brand?
Yeah, the game plan was I would try to do the creative projects that I wanted to do, which at the time were more about illustration. I wanted to be doing illustrations, and I would supplement the income doing freelance design work. And thankfully, there's tons of freelance work to be done. It's New York, everyone needs help here and there on something. And so I ended up being able to supplement my income that way. But it kind of became all consuming. In a way, it was like I quit my full time job to then just go doing start doing the exact same thing, but for tons of different people and clients. But it still occupied my whole day every day. And so, in a way, it was just it wasn't the change that I thought I was going to have. It wasn't the amount of time that I thought that I would have to be working on my own projects, and it was still just like the same old thing in a way. And that actually took a couple of years. It took me a couple of years to evolve to a place where I was able to start turning down these freelance design gigs, and stop seeking them, start turning them down, and start actually getting paid for the creative projects that I wanted to do. And a lot of that was murals. I found kind of a niche in painting murals where I realized I could make decent money painting murals, and that could supplement my other projects rather than doing the freelance design work.
That's great to hear you just talk about the length of time that it did take a few years. I think that puts a lot of people's mind at ease. That because when we see like your book or that mural, it's like, oh, it just feels like Jason arrived and boom, he that was it. But it's great to
Right.
hear that the process and the hustle, and not the hustle porn of it all, but the fact that there was like a lot of years for you to get that kind of momentum. And and now here you are, like an overnight success after several years.
Yeah, I mean it's actually 10 years. I quit my full-time job 10 years ago. So it is a lot of time. And it's funny that you bring that up because you see people on Instagram or whatever, and it always seems like whatever they're doing seems so immediate. Like yesterday they didn't have whatever campaign or whatever new sculpture, and all of a sudden they're just like exploding. Like it looks like everyone is in that state. So I totally feel you.
Absolutely. And so how do you, so your taste is driving you more towards murals and everything. So what was a first, maybe your first victory that really, that you could put your stamp on, that put that fuel in your tank so you could, snowball the fact that this taste of that you have of painting murals.
Well, the one very pivotal mural was a couple years ago. It was the award for a contest that I entered. It was a mural design contest, and it was a real estate company. They had a bunch of empty properties, and they had a vacant wall on. It was a very public facing wall on the street, and so they wanted to put up a mural. They ran this contest, and I won the contest, and that so the prize for the contest was the opportunity to paint my design onto that wall. And they did pay me as well, which is nice, for those who are listening who are like, don't work for free. So I did get paid, but the opportunity was massive because this is a very public facing street in Manhattan. For those of you who live in New York, it's 16th and 6th Avenue, which is in Chelsea. It's a great spot. So that was a big break for me because I had done a lot of mural work in Brooklyn and like indoors. Like, people always want something related to their brand, like in their conference room or like the lobby of a little hotel, things like that. I had been able to do a lot of, but I didn't have any public facing work like that. So when I got that mural, once it was done, like in a way that was kind of the overnight, that moment that we were just talking about, that kind of happened with that mural. And the reason is primarily because it's on a very busy street, and it was just the sheer number of human beings that walk by that wall every single day. And so I started getting inquiries. People walk by and they see the work and they're like, oh, we've got a building or whatever. And one thing led to the next, but it all sort of started for me with that particular mural. And ironically, that mural, the message that I put in that mural is live life colorfully, which is the title of my book. So full circle.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what was and you kind of allude to this in the introduction of your book, is that your palette as an artist, of course, is very vibrant colors, but I think there might have been somewhat of a hesitation to be that bold in your application to try to win this contest. So what was the calculus you were undergoing and finally just relenting to what is ultimately your taste?
Well, I mean, that's a great observation. When I was like I mentioned in the intro to the book, when I was strategizing how to win that contest, and this is the designer in me, of course, instead of thinking like, what do I want to paint, I'm thinking, how am I going to win this? What do they want to see? So that's kind of where my head was. And I was doing the work I was doing before that was colorful, and it was very like, message driven. It was all about positivity. The themes were there, but my palette wasn't necessarily so fluorescent and so bright. And I think the best way to say it is I was not nearly as confident with color at that time.
Hmm.
So the decision to use that much color was kind of driven by the message itself. I liked that quote. I'd stumbled upon this quote that says, "When you live life colorfully, people talk about you." And that resonated so much with me because it was so curious. I was like, what does that even mean? And I loved that I didn't know what it meant, and that it could go both ways. Like, do you like people talking about you? Do you not? Like, it's very individual and personal. So when I decided to use that bit of the quote for my piece, I felt like the only way to design it was with a full, like, massive amount of color, and the mural came out very, like, bright, bold, proud, like, Technicolor, and so when that started to pick up, I realized how much people responded to that. I realized that it was resonating with, everyone who walked by it. There were so many people taking pictures and posting and tagging, and I kind of saw it as an opportunity. Like, I've got to integrate this, whatever's working here. I got to do that more. So that kind of started off this, like, massive explosion of color that I started to integrate into my work. But it wasn't out of the blue. Like, I had built up to it, I think, enough that I was able to develop the confidence from there to keep using that much color.
A negative world that we tend to be living in, how important is it for you to, be able to express, yourself with, the art that you bring to the world with such generosity, and to use it in such a vibrant way to put that colorful life in front of us, and that and imbue us with a certain measure of positivity?
I mean, it's kind of become a bit of a role that I've assigned to myself, and it's something that I love. Like I said, I'm the oldest brother. I'm number two of seven, so I kind of have a big brother personality. And now that big brother might not be the best way to phrase it, but you know what I mean. So I guess what I should say is I have a bit of a caretaker kind of personality, and I think that plays a role in the messaging and the art that I want to put out there, because I do feel this driving force that in my work, where I feel like I want to share things with the world, and I want to remind people, people that I know, people that I love, and people that I don't know. I want to remind them that, like, we're in this together. We will be okay. Like, yeah, the world is crazy right now, and it probably will be always. Tomorrow will be something new, and to me that's fine, because we have each other. We are able to be optimistic, and these kinds of feelings and this type of messaging, I think it makes me feel good to share that kind of stuff. So in a way, it's kind of just become my MO.
Whether you're a writer or a visual artist like yourself, there is always this conundrum of not conundrum, but as you're developing as an artist, of trying to find your voice. And
Right.
so what was the challenge, or not the challenge, or maybe just the journey of you finding your voice and settling into your particular groove?
People often talk about that. I think that's a common thread with probably with everyone, but with artists, obviously that's my realm. It's sort of like, how do you find your style? How do you find your voice? And the truth is, I think that you don't find it until you stop trying to find it. You just make work. If you're a writer, you just keep writing. If you draw, then you just keep drawing, and the more you do it, you start to see patterns. You start to see a rhythm in what you're doing, and then one day you look back and you realize, oh, I actually, I can see that I have a voice, and that's kind of how it was for me. I didn't. I remember thinking to myself, like, maybe if I apply this formula, like, oh, there's this artist that I love, and they do all black and white with, like, one color. So if I do that, then maybe I can get make a name for myself or whatever. Like, I had those kinds of thoughts, and then at one point, not sure when this happened. I can only say it now in retrospect. At some point, I gave up on trying to like, put that into a formula, and I just started painting and making work. And now looking back, I realize I love doing colorful stuff. I love positive messaging, and that's just what I do. And now I know that's my voice, but I don't know exactly how I got here. I do know that it's been a lot of hours of work.
The colorful nature of what you do is just so, it's like that person you walked into a room and you see them and they're just like, I like hanging out with that guy, or I like hanging out with her. Like, they're just cool. And when I leave that conversation, I'm just like, oh man, I wanna do that. I want to be better. And is that kind of a core ethos of your work, that when people see your work or even hang out with you, that you want them to take that energy and parlay it into something good for themselves?
Totally, and that's so beautifully put. I mean, I love that analogy, and I think that brings up the point of authenticity. Like, I hope that when people meet me, if they know my work, I hope that when they meet me, they feel like it's one and the same. I want to behave and, like, comport myself in a way that matches what I'm saying. You know, the messages that I'm putting on the street have got to match what's actually in my heart and match the way I live my life. And it doesn't have to be that deliberate. I mean, it actually is who I am. I'm a pretty like happy-go-lucky guy, so it does fit. But it's I love the way you put that. You know, I hope that people feel that way.
And I was reading a cool little illustration slash comic from the designer Lisa Congdon on Instagram, and she wrote just this quick little thing, and it just said community over competition. And
Hmm.
I think that's really important. And I talk to a lot of people on the show about the toxic nature of like jealousy and envy and competition among peers, and how that's a fuel that doesn't really burn clean. That
Right.
it is better to build community. And I was wondering, like, maybe if you can speak to that in your world, how important it is to build community and to try to foster that instead of feeling jealous or envious of each other.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. First of all, I love that you brought up Lisa. She's one of my heroes, and I met her once. We have a great Instagram relationship, but I met her
Oh,
once in
nice.
person when she was speaking, and she's so lovely. So yeah, and her work is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I have an abundance mindset, and I think that it's a crucial way to be. You know, if you want to, I mean, for anyone, you know, if you want to have success and if you want to feel content and happy with the work that you're doing, you have to have that mindset. You know, it's toxic. Competition is, you know, healthy competition. I guess people could speak to that, but for me, I think it's pretty toxic if you find yourself comparing, competing. You know, you'll never add up if you sit around and compare yourself to the limited amount of information you have about other artists, other people, and especially like with Instagram. You know, you look at someone else's Instagram, and everyone else has way more clients, way more money, way more time. Like everything's way better, and that's not at
Right.
all the truth. So this is easy to say too. You know, I can sit here and say like, oh, that's toxic. Just don't do it. Like have an abundance mindset. It's hard to actually practice that way every single day. You know, to live your life that way. But I do try. I do try to do that. And the best way for me, I think, to maintain that attitude is to share with other people, share opportunities, share walls, share projects. You know, and share information with other people.
And as you were synthesizing the book, what was the challenge for you, who's someone who is, primarily a visual artist working in paints and spray paints and whatever?
Mhm.
What was the challenge for you to then, write a book, put down text, colorful text, and also some cool research behind what color can do to your brain in terms of memory and remembering things?
Well, the writing was actually kind of hard for me, and the idea for the book had been kind of buttoned up between my agent, myself, and then once I got the book deal with the editor. So, and what that means is the book is 99 ideas to add joy, positivity, and creativity to your life. So these 99 ideas actually started out as a list of like 300 ideas, and I
Oh,
had
wow.
whittled it down. Yeah, totally, like just a brain dump. You know, like I had just and actually, I had enlisted the help of my mom. She helped me brainstorm some of those ideas. So some of the list of those original ideas came from her, and a couple of them are in the book, which is amazing. So when she got the book, she was of course so thrilled. But anyway, the list had been narrowed down to the 99 ideas, and once that was in place, then I started to do all the illustrations. So I had all this art. I had this list of ideas. They're like trivia. Some are like challenges. I had this list. I had all the art that went with it, and then I had to sit down and write. And up till that point, it came really easy for me. It was what I was used to doing. You know, coming up with ideas, coming up with compositions, designs, and even doing like lettering that goes with the art or the design. Like to me, that's part of the story, but to me, that's the art. So once that was all done, I had to sit down and write it. And I think I'm pretty decent at writing like captions for my Instagram posts, but I don't think I'm a writer, and I'm still coming to terms with calling myself an author. But I did somehow page after page like write all of this. And my editor was great. She helped me to kind of maintain my voice, and obviously for people who are writers, that's a big thing. My voice, my visual voice is very clear. My writing voice needed some work. So that process was a little bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah, I would say the written voice and your textual delivery of your messages was very congruent with the visuals, and the guitar was in tune, if that makes any sense to you. To me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great compliment. Thank you.
And I'm big on, sort of the routines and discipline and the practice that goes behind doing creative work. So when you were just, let's just use the book as an example. When you were, in the generative phase of it, how were you setting up your days so you were, just clipping along, in the grind and, meeting, deadlines, whether they be external or the ones you set for yourself?
Um, that's a great question. I do have a pretty like structured day, life, week, whatever you want to call it. But I wake up at the same time. I do my exercise. I often have a bunch of emails to deal with, and then I usually end up doing the more creative stuff like later in the afternoon and into the evenings. And the way it was with the book, I often set aside Sundays as days to just sit on the couch. I'll put on bad TV, and I'll have my iPad in my hands, and I'll just do like sketching. Basically, it's like kind of creative planning. I'm sketching out things that are going to be coming up, and I'm just trying to not think about things and just sketch. So a lot of the book happened on Sundays, and I was able to kind of block out like for the next 8 Sundays or whatever it was, I'm working on the book, and I would get into a rhythm where I would, it's like you kind of get into a rabbit hole with your own stuff, and you're lost, or you're deep in this hole, and you're just working and writing and drawing and doing the creative thing. And those Sundays turned out to be the kind of like sacred day for me to be working on my book, and that's kind of how I got through it. So most of the work, especially the visual work, happened in that kind of rabbit hole mindset that I got into each Sunday for the course of a couple of months. And then when it got to the writing portion, I felt a little bit of the pressure of the deadline. So that was more of a like daily, I was trying to work it into my daily tasks. And I would just do it one page at a time. Like, I've got to figure out how to write today. I'm going to write this one page. And if you look at the book, of course, like we're talking about a couple of sentences. So it really doesn't seem like a lot of writing, but to actually condense my idea down to the couple of sentences took a little bit more work than one might think.
Oh yeah, well, and looking at, one of the page, I put a bunch of sticky notes when I read books, and one particular one that stood out to me was, color coding your calendar, and
Right.
that's one I can see that one almost taking like a week to do, because you have like a little thing for each day, and it's very, very detailed. So I suspect some of these, might take you an afternoon, but maybe one like that one probably, it could take you an entire day, or maybe a few days, or a week.
Yeah, totally. And that's funny. The calendar was actually, that's one of the ones that was quite laborious. And I just turned to that page as well. Oddly, maybe not surprisingly, many of the things that are on that calendar were actually on my calendar at the time. For example, like I did need to talk to the IRS at the time, and it's on that calendar. So I put like mail the checks, talk to the IRS, and then I put stop worrying, because at the time I was like, I'm worrying about the IRS and my taxes and all that stuff, and that was real life. That's what was happening. So I included it in the drawing.
I love that, because I have three big dry erase calendars on my wall, and I color code it just based on certain tasks. That way, I can just look at it and be like, oh, I see a bunch of green, and that means podcast interviews. So I can just see at a glance. I'm like, okay, those days look pretty booked, and it's
Yep.
just in terms of color, it's just like you don't have to necessarily read it, but you see the color, and you're like, oh, okay, deadline's there. Appointments there. It's so helpful, and it's just the way you illustrate it too is just really like a fun take on that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's interesting, like, to note the power of color in that application.
Exactly, because it is something like, okay, you don't necessarily need to get into the granularity of it, but you can take this big helicopter view of your calendar, your 3 month outlook, and just be like, okay, I can see where things are starting to fill up, and it's like, oh, okay, that's great. I can see that week is going to be a bear in terms of logistics, but that one looks pretty. That one looks pretty good. That one's just this, that, and the other, but it's like it, and then you zoom in and be like, okay, that's what I'm really dealing with on like a on the playing field, so to speak. But yeah, being able to see that color right off the bat, it just defines things in an instant, which it can alleviate a lot of stress. I know it does for me.
Yeah, it totally does. And it's the thing is, it's one of those little things that most people totally understand it. Most people actually do it, they don't realize that they're doing it or why they're doing it, and they may not have sat down to think like, wow, this color coding my calendar is actually a quite powerful and effective way to do things. It's, some people are just doing it because it looks nice or because they've always done it or whatever. But the point of that page is to remind people like this is real. This is real stuff we're talking about. So
I love later in the book too. You have this great little illustration about a permission slip, and so many people who want to get into something creative, they often feel like they need permission from some external force, and they don't realize that sometimes it really just comes from within, and you just have to have the courage to take the leap yourself. So, what was the ethos behind making sure you include something of that nature that really empowers the reader and the artist to be?
yeah, I mean, I've I've always been kind of fascinated with that whole concept of like the permission and the idea of should and could, and it's kind of a self-help topic, but I think there's something interesting about this idea that this little slip, this little piece of paper or this little thing that you have that you write, you are entitled to do this or you have permission to do this, and this simple little act or this simple little piece of paper now gives you license to do something that you wanted to do. Like in a way, there's two sides of this. Like in a way, it's really powerful that that can, that this little act or this little piece of paper can do that for you. And then on the other hand, it's kind of bullshit that like that we, as people feel like we need this little thing, this little piece of paper to actually begin something that is what's in our heart or that's our passion or that's our dream. And I kind of wanted to, to point out both sides of that without actually spelling it out. And there's the one permission slip that says you don't need permission for anything, so this is your permission to not need permission. And the point of that one is sort of to to look at the other side of it, which is like, why do you need permission? Like if this is your dream, just go get it, go chase it, like start right now, and no one's stopping you but you, so get on it, and that's sort of the point. And then the other permission slip that's in there is the coupon is about like, well, you're entitled, if this is what you want, you're entitled to it, so take it. And both of them are meant to be very motivating, obviously.
Yeah, and it's and I think a lot of people too, they go to an MFA program or grad school for pursuing a thing, whether it's to be a writer or an artist. And really what they do want, they want some sort of a diploma that says, yes, I'm a writer or I'm a painter. But the all you need are some supplies and the willingness to be bad at this for a long time, and then you will get
Yeah.
good. Right, you'll get good if you just keep doing it.
Totally. Yeah, you will figure it out. I mean, and it's I everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone has those feelings, and it doesn't go away. That's the thing. And I like to remind people of that because I feel that way still to this day, and I'm sure I will until the day I die. And it's not, you'll never. I don't believe that people will necessarily get over feeling that. They'll just learn how to manage it and use it. I've found myself feeling that way in a fresh, like a fresh new version of that recently because of the book. Like I feel really confident that I'm an artist. I know how to use color. Like I feel like I'm a master of color and all these things, right? But now I like I put it on my bio the other day on my Instagram account. I added author, and I caught myself as I was doing it. I'm like, am I an author? Like, do I get to put this? Like, I had those thoughts that came into my mind, and then I'm like, I'm holding a book in my hand, like I am an author, but I'm still like dealing with those feelings. And so it just goes to show you like that it's very real, and it's also totally unnecessary, and you can move through it and do the work.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm not classically trained in radio or audio production or anything, but I've just been doing this on my own and learning skills like this for many years now. And if I type in a Twitter bio or my Instagram that I'm also like a producer of podcasts, like that feels weird to me. I'm more of a writer. Saying a writer, I'm like, oh
Right.
yeah, I can do that. But typing like, yeah, producer, I'm like, whoa, wait, no, I'm not. This is a thing I picked up on the side, but I've been doing it, and I can make them for other people, and it's just a thing I developed because I wanted to try it. And but it's weird. I totally get it. Like, it doesn't feel right, Nate, calling yourself the thing, even though you've been doing it for a while.
It goes to show you also that if you do the work, then you will cross over. You will get through that feeling, that imposter syndrome, and it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of labor, and it's maybe the 10,000 hour. Maybe in 2 years I'll speak to you again, and I'll be like, hey, you know what? I am totally an author, and I've got another book on the way. But today I don't necessarily feel that. So it's it is, you still got to do your part, but it's possible to get past it.
Yeah. So how do you process that, and how are you starting to get comfortable with the fact of calling yourself a writer and an author beside your the other designations that that you have right now? How have you been processing that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that has helped me is doing the podcast, and I've been doing them, because of launching the book. I've been doing many of them, which has been amazing. First of all, because it's gotten me talking about the book. Um, I remember just fairly recently somebody saying, "Tell me about the book. Give me your elevator pitch." And I kind of stumbled because I didn't, even though I had created the book, I didn't really know how to condense it into this elevator pitch, which is kind of silly. But the point is, like, I have had these opportunities to talk about the book, to talk about my writing, to break down my process, and which has been really cool because also each podcast host has different questions about the book, and it's pushed me out of my comfort zone in a lot of great ways, and I think that has been massive in helping me to see that this is a thing that I wrote, that I am the creator of this thing, and I'm entitled to feel proud of being the writer and being the author. So I'm getting there.
It and over the course of writing the book and and putting this thing together, in over the course of your research too, what surprised you most about color and what it can do to our brains and our mood?
I think the most surprising thing that I learned is that there's not a lot of consistent information and or research or data, about the psychology of color, the meaning of color. And that's not to say that there isn't a lot. There's tons, but it doesn't all align. And so I think my biggest finding is that the meaning, the emotional meaning of color, the psychological meaning of color, the application of color, even from like a neurological standpoint, like there's all these sort of scientific work done about color. All of it is reliant upon culture, time in history, geographic location. Like there's so many variables in it, and so the big answer to the question is it's kind of up to you. And that's what I kind of took away from creating this book, is that color is a very personal thing, it's a very powerful thing, and it's something that you are able, every single person on this earth is able to pick up, use how they want to, understand it how they want to, and make it what it is for them in a very personal way. And that's what's so special about it.
And given that we've been, living through this pandemic for nearly a year now, how important would you say, color is in a time where people are struggling so much? So how important, or what value would you put color, in a time that's so bleak for so many?
I mean, it's way up there. It's way up there on the priorities. I think that being cooped up in your house, looking at Zoom all day, or whatever people do, is the exact reason why we need color. And the human psyche needs variety. You need to see, the world around you. Like, nature is a very colorful and diverse place, and the human being, in order to be, like, to be okay, to be sane, needs to have this variety and this diversity in stimulation, interaction, and color is the simplest way to provide diversity and variety in the stimulation. And so I think it can come in the form of a book. It can come in the form of going outside and taking a walk, which is one of the pages of my book. Just like, get off the chair and go out and walk, because that will do so much for your well-being, and you don't even realize it until you've done it. And part of that is that you are seeing something different than your screen, or the walls in your bedroom, or whatever whatever it is. You're providing variety in how you're stimulating yourself and your brain, and so it's crucial.
Sort of as we kind of bring this airliner down for a landing, you would sort of emit through your work, a lot of optimism and positivity, And like we were saying earlier, it's stuff you want to be around that kind of energizes you. So
Right.
as you go forward with this book and as you keep evolving and developing as an artist, where do you see your taste taking you? And also like where does your optimism lie as we go forward?
Well, I think that the work can evolve visually. I don't see myself doing a strictly black and white series of work in the near future or anything, but visually the work can evolve. I think the universal theme that's in my work, I think is pretty timeless, and that is the kindness and the positivity. I think those things are not going away. I think they will become more and more important to me and to the world as time goes on. So I feel this sense of security about it. I feel like I've embraced these themes in my work that are going to carry me forward, and visually I'm not sure where it'll go, but thematically it's going to stay the same. So, did that answer the question though, actually, now that I'm thinking about it?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of where your work is going, and yeah, and just it's sometimes in these fields, it can be sometimes hard to keep that positive energy going, because yeah, there is a grind aspect to doing creative work. So sometimes having that thing that keeps you that puts fuel in your tank, like in your back pocket, can really help you through some bleak times, and certainly when the work feels laborious.
Yes, totally. And I think that's the beauty of having this kind of a message driven, kind of theme focused practice. For me, it's, the labor of the work will change and it'll come and go. And to be honest with you, there are times when I'm in the sun, like painting a mural, and I'm tired, and like it isn't the most joyful moment of life. But the bigger picture is that the point of the work is to spread the message, and the message matters, and so that always is enough to keep going.
Nice. Well, Jason, this was so great to get to talk to you and unpack, how you go about the work and your wonderful book that is just instantly fun. The minute you open up, it's just like bursting and overflowing with, just wonderful stuff. So it's just incredibly fun to fill up your cup. So thank you for the work and thanks for coming on the show.
Oh man, it was my great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as we are wont to say on this podcast, that was a toe-tapping good time. Had a good time there. I like that. Jason's book's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun reading it. You can read it super fast. I think I totally read it in maybe 45 minutes. But it's one of those things where I put a bunch of sticky notes in it. I'm like, I'm going to go back to that. That's cool stuff right there. Something about color that's a whole lot of fun, You need that pop on your shelf, and you need that pop in your wardrobe too. It just kind of makes you feel alive. So thanks to Jason. Thank you, CNFers. You know I mean it. While I might still have your attention, if you leave a kind review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot of that when it publishes, send it to me. Either the Creative Nonfiction email, the Brendan O'Mara email, whatever one. Your choice, dealer's choice. And I'll coach up a piece up. I'll coach up a piece up? Ah, God. I will coach up a piece of your work of up to 2,000 words. Give you a nice experience, one hopes. So once the review publishes, we'll get started. Sound like a plan? Let's do it. Why not? So my war against social media, it's like I feel like the father in A Christmas Story and his rivalry with the Bumpus's dogs, just screaming, as they eat the turkey and anything. So I have a similar rivalry, as a lot of you know. So I took it even a step farther. So some of you might know I deleted Facebook. I don't entirely regret that, just a little, and that's fine. There were some groups that were like CNF related that I think benefited the show somewhat, and it was nice to contribute to those communities. But I don't think the trade-off was ultimately worth it to stay on the platforms. And I know the people in those groups, so if I really wanted to still get in there, I can say hey, listen, if you want to share this with that group, I think it'll be worth it. But I'm not there anymore. Just want to scrub that from my life. I've been keeping Twitter to a minimum, mainly scheduling tweets ahead of time via Hootsuite. I don't see any weirdness through Hootsuite, so I can book my tweets and kind of move on. I check Twitter sort of like email. Did someone say hi or link up to the show? If so, I want to give a little love for that. I don't always see it. I guess my notifications are kind of wonky, so sometimes I scroll along and look at a tweet I had put up and say, "Oh wow, someone liked it or quote tweeted it," and I want to give some recognition for that. It's always nice. I'm at a point with the show's audience where it's not a gigantic distraction to do that. It's not like I'm overwhelmed there, so I do have the time and the bandwidth to give digital fist bumps in a skull. You know how that is. Instagram only works on mobile, so I've got that still on my phone. But in an extreme effort to curtail distraction, I deleted my email accounts that matter on my phone. I need to keep one there as like a placeholder, so to speak. But I deleted my real email accounts from the phone. I would always check it in every down moment when I was just kind of between tasks and it was just getting out of hand. So I got rid of it. Turned my phone into the 2007 iteration of Steve Jobs' iPhone, which is to say it's like an iPod used as a phone. So that's what I did. So I've got my Spotify, I've got my podcast app. I like to listen to with Pocket Casts, texting, phone, Headspace meditation app, and my camera. And that is it for the phone. And today's the day I deleted it, and I even made it like an anniversary thing, kind of in my bullet journal, like delete an email from my phone. And I would feel myself reaching for it, just that impulse, that habit, that addiction to refresh, like, oh, did someone send anything in it? So I need to then check in with the computer to check email, and that's where I have Twitter. That's where I access Twitter too, is through the computer. I don't have it on my phone. So I've reintroduced the casual email into my life as a way to say hi to friends. I even wrote a zine for a friend too, because I don't know, I love zines. So taking all that junk off my phone means I have to focus on what matters and not get distracted by nonsense. I say all this because I suspect that maybe some of you wrestle with it. And I can say this. Just try something out. Try Twitter-free Tuesdays, or no Instagram Mondays, or social media free Saturdays. Any alliteration you can come up with, it definitely helps. I know the days that I don't engage at all, I feel that little pang of FOMO. But by and large, I feel better, more energized, more useful, and more engaged with the work that matters, and not pulled into the vortex of toxic comparison and bullshit. Experiment for yourself. Let me know what you're up to. It'd be good to know. In the meantime, keep the conversation going on social media at CNFPod and Twitter and Instagram for inspiring tidbits. Anyway, Patreon is where it's at. If you have a few bucks to throw into the podcast coffers, money gets funneled right into the production of the show and the audio magazine. Like I say, it's free, but it's not cheap. You get access to forthcoming magazines, transcripts, and coaching. Shop around. There's gold in them thar hills. And get on that newsletter mailing list. Just had a great exclusive CNF and happy hour the other day with a few newsletter pals. So big ups to Suzanne, Betsy, Lori, and Andrew. Might have a guest back for next one. You'll just have to subscribe to find out. BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey. So until then, stay cool, CNFers. Stay cool forever. See ya.